Also on the show, Ivanka Trump will be in India at Prime Minister Narendra Modi's invitation. We tell you what to expect at the India-US Global Entrepreneurship Summit in Hyderabad. What is the coalition of Muslim nations? Can it be an effective force against terrorism, as the Saudi Crown Prince claims? Airports closed, hundreds of thousands of people evacuated as a volcano in Bali spews massive ash clouds. And the inside story of Robert Mugabe's dethronement, how it had been in the works for months with the tacit support of Johannesburg and Beijing. Also, why Xi Jinping says toilets are the key to China's future growth. But first to Pakistan. You've seen images of protests and fighting over the weekend, an agitation that paralyzed the government and exposed how weak it was. Now we'll show you what the army was up to. Take a look at this video and listen carefully to what the general is saying.
सर ये हम कर लेंगे नहीं आपकी तरफ कोई चले ये हमारी तरफ नहीं जनाब क्या हम आपके साथ नहीं है गुड गिफ्ट क्या हम आपके साथ नहीं है आप नहीं बोलिए अल्लाह ताला आपको हमारे साथ कोई बात नहीं सर इसमें कितने पैसे 1000 हाँ ये देखिए हमारे बच्चों की बात सुनो उन्होंने ना ऊपर जो बैठे हुए हैं ना उन्होंने खुद को आवाम को आपस में लड़ा के ना ये सुन ले कितने अकल की बात है हमारे ये सारे इंशाल्लाह सारे छुड़वाएंगे वो उधर हमको दीजिएगा ये वो हैं जो कि अभी हमें एक थाने से हमने निकाले हैं कुछ थोड़े और भी दूसरे.
And before we discuss what this video means, let's put it in context for you. Pakistan saw a 21-day-long sit-in. The government and protesters have finally called a truce. The price was the job of Federal Law Minister Zahid Hamid. WION's Pakistan Bureau Chief Taha Siddiqui reports.
After 21 days of blocking entry roads to Islamabad and losing 5 supporters in deadly clashes over the last weekend, Khadim Hussain Rizvi, the leader of Tehreek-e-Labbaik Ya Rasool, officially ended the sit-in on Monday morning. The authorities have given the protesters 12 hours to move out. The government and protesters struck an agreement, one that has been reportedly brokered by the Pakistan Army. Within 30 days, the authorities will release the results of a probe into the alleged change in the amendments to the Finality of Prophethood Declaration. The declaration is part of the Elections Act 2017 and is meant for electoral candidates. The agreement also assures punishment to anyone that the probe finds guilty of intentionally making the controversial change. The deal also envisages the release of workers of religious parties who have been arrested since November 6th. They will be released and cases against them dismissed. Further, an inquiry board will be set up to probe the government action against protesters and fix responsibility for the same. Late on Sunday, the Law Minister Zahid Hamid voluntarily stepped down. He tendered his resignation to Prime Minister Shahid Khaqan Abbasi, and it was accepted on Monday morning. Mr. Hamid's resignation had been the first demand made by the protesters. But the agreement between the two sides is also under fire from courts hearing the case regarding the protest. Judge Shaukat Siddiqui has questioned the government over its acceptance of the protesters' demands. Justice Siddiqui also wanted to know in what capacity the Pakistan Army Chief, General Qamar Bajwa, appeared as an arbitrator. The case has been adjourned till December 4th.
Behind me is one of the entrances into Islamabad that was blocked for over 20 days by protesters. But now that their demands have been met, it has been partially reopened, and it is expected that by Tuesday morning, normalcy will return to the capital and across the country. This is Taha Siddiqui with cameraman Rao Bilal reporting for WION from Islamabad.
How did it all begin? Who were the protesters? Why were they targeting the Law Minister of Pakistan? And what did the army do? Archana Solanki explains the latest crisis that has engulfed Pakistan.
Over 2 weeks of protests in major cities of Pakistan have cost the country's law minister his job. It all started when protesters from religious parties like Tehreek-e-Nubuwat, Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan and the Sunni Tehreek Pakistan organized a sit-in at Faizabad interchange in the capital, Islamabad. They blocked a key highway used by thousands of commuters. This happened on 6th of November. The hardline Islamists accused the law minister of blasphemy. Why? Because they claim that the government deliberately omitted a reference to the Prophet Muhammad in a new version of electoral oath. To firefight the crisis, the government apologized and claimed that the omission was nothing but a clerical error. The situation worsened last week when the Islamabad High Court ordered the government to end the ongoing Faizabad sit-in by Sunday, and that's when violence started. According to reports, 6 people were killed and over 250 people were injured in clashes with the police. The army was deployed in addition to 8,000 security personnel to disperse the protesters. Schools in Karachi, Islamabad and Rawalpindi were closed down. Access to social media sites like Twitter and Facebook was also cut across the country to prevent rumour mongering. In addition to this, an official diktat by Pakistan government to news channels to desist from showing live coverage of protests was also given. Pakistan's Law Minister's resignation has once again brought the blasphemy laws in Pakistan under spotlight. These laws make insulting Islam a crime punishable by death. Despite mounting criticism, Pakistan has done nothing about it.
Joining us this evening, Taha Siddiqui, our bureau chief in Islamabad. Also with us, Raymond E. Vickery, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce and Trade Development, also advisor on U.S.-India relations with us from Washington. Rizal Hassan Laskar, Associate Editor of the Hindustan Times with us from New Delhi. And Ahmed Shaheen, Head of Special Investigations and Advisor to Geo News in Pakistan and Islamabad. Good evening to all of you. Taha Siddiqui, let's begin with you. That video that has come out has raised many questions. Is it being broadcast in the Pakistani media? What is the buzz? What is being said about the army's role?
Well, basically, this surfaced earlier today when the protesters had ended their protest. After that, the Rangers the chief of Rangers, so the Rangers is run by the Pakistan Army, and the chief of that Punjab Rangers, which are deployed in Islamabad, he went to meet with the protesters and he released some of the protesters that were in the custody. And while releasing them, these envelopes were handed out as a goodwill gesture, saying that this money, which was 1,000 rupees in each envelope, which is around about $10, $10 US, that money will be used by these protesters to go back home as their bus fares. So in Pakistani media, this is being reported. The whole video is being aired and is being talked about. But also, given how the situation has been in the last few days, and how there have been sort of some talks of how there could be other powers behind this sit-in, this video sort of also looks like as if it's a commentary on that.
Indeed. Ahmed Shaheen, what does one make of a general in uniform giving money to religious fundamentalists who are protesting?
It's as atrocious, but I think things that shouldn't be really a norm of any country or any place is becoming a norm. Earlier, media was held hostage and nothing really happened. It's just, media, some reporters were held hostage and later on they were let go. People in uniform are paying people who are not, I wouldn't say they're protesters, I think they're terrorists because they were terrorizing the whole country. The civilians, they were terrorizing everybody. They were, they were involved in arson, looting, hurting people, a lot of violence and causing damage to the state property. These are terrorists. And if we see people in uniform paying terrorists, then it's not just, people talking about it. Now people can see it too.
Rizal Laskar, how do you see this? Was this an army brokered agreement? Was the army called in? Did the army come in on its own?
Well, nothing really happens in Pakistan without the army having some sort of a role, whether in the background or in the foreground. The Pakistani media has been, showing images of an agreement that was signed, and it appears to have the signature also of an ISI official. So it's very clear that the army and the ISI played a role in brokering this agreement. Also, it's, although the government turned to the army as a last resort, the army chief made it very, very clear that he was not going to crack down on these people who had virtually paralyzed Islamabad and other parts of the country for such a long time. So once again, people will have questions, legitimate questions about the role the Pakistani army intends to play against terrorists and against extremists like these groups.
Raymond, how does Washington view these developments? Religious hardliners have forced the entire state to surrender. A law minister has had to resign over a blasphemy controversy.
Well, I think once again it shows how deplorable the situation is in Pakistan in terms of religious extremism. It seems to me that the role of the United States here is to try to bring about the strengthening of the democracy which is there, so that there can be a partner for building some kind of peace. It is the position of the United States, of course, that there should be the institutions which provide for free speech and for the rule of law. This obviously is very much contrary to that. That having been said, it's obviously a difficult situation, showing that in Pakistan there is no one actor, and to view Pakistan simply as a unitary situation is just not accurate. So the United States and India seems to me need to work more closely than ever to try to promote the moderation, the rationality, as opposed to allowing these forces to degenerate and take over in South Asia.
Taha, what do the court's objections mean at this stage? Can they operate freely even if it means ruling against what the army has done?
Well, the statement that's come out of Justice Shaukat Siddiqui, who's a Islamabad High Court judge, and he was hearing a petition today with regards to this particular sit-in only, which was filed in a sort of a public safety for the public good. This petition was filed, and basically, from what we understand, that he reprimanded the government, he questioned the government, and made statements which have never been made before by a judge. So it was quite, quite different to hear that, and quite brave of the judge to say that. Even while he was saying that, he said that people who question these kind of things, for example, he said something like why the military chief was part of the arbitration, why was the military involved? It seems like it was done at their behest. And then he went on to say that people who raise these kind of questions, sometimes they go missing, or sometimes they are picked up. So things like that were said by this particular judge, which is quite unheard of. But given the fact that now that the sit-in has ended, the hearing has been postponed till December 5th, it doesn't seem like as if this judge or this particular hearing will go anywhere from what we saw today. That was the most of the statements that will come out of it.
Emma, has the government in Islamabad all but accepted that it's a lame duck government? It's powerless when faced with religious fundamentalists like these political newbies, many are calling them.
Yes, this hostage situation in which the whole country was taken hostage successfully by criminals and terrorists, and in the end the government had to tiptoe around, not creating enough chaos so that there are legitimate, so-called legitimate reasons to, usurp the government. So the government, unfortunately, because the government was not strengthened by pro-democratic forces, the civil society, the general public, the government did not have support from any institutions, even the judiciary. The judiciary did criticize the military, but the judiciary was not in any way strengthening the role of the executive, the government. So the government had no support from any quarters, and the government, to begin with, knew that it does not enjoy support from all these quarters of power. And the government, I mean, it's disappointing what the government did. The government's completely given in. We've lied down on our backs, let the terrorists do what they want to do. It is a failure for the government, but I could not have imagined any other outcome of the situation. It doesn't work like that anymore.
Razaul Laskar, was the government truly powerless to act against these people? And is it evident now that the army sided with the Islamists?
Well, there seems to be a preponderance. Say that the army sided with the extremists, but the army definitely didn't do anything to, curb the activities of these people who had taken over the streets, who were creating mischief, who were, paralyzing normal life, not only in Islamabad, but in other cities. More than anything else, the PMLN, the ruling PMLN, has become even more weak now. I mean, this is a party which just months ago, lost its prime minister. It has another politician running things by proxy. It really doesn't seem to show much leadership going into the next election, which is just months away. And it's going to be a very tough uphill battle for the PMLN this time. And, the shocking thing was, when the PML won the last time, there were a lot of expectations from this party that it would do things, it would change things, especially as far as extremism is concerned. But unfortunately, former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif just hasn't shown that kind of leadership, and neither have the other leaders in his party.
Raymond, the US president keeps talking about pressurizing Pakistan, making the government act against religious fundamentalists. But here you have a government that has virtually capitulated in front of these protesters. The army is clearly backing them. What does it mean for the South Asia policy? We know that James Mattis is going to be visiting this weekend. Is this something that he'll raise with the Pakistanis?
Well, I think it will be something that he raises. I don't think there's any question that there has to be a continued pressure in regard to the kind of terrorism which is said that terrorism toward India is acceptable, but terrorism when it's toward Afghanistan and U.S. troops there is not acceptable. There has to be an across-the-board approach to it. These protests and the giving in of the government shows how difficult the situation is. But that's no reason to withdraw. It requires a comprehensive kind of approach. I'm very happy that Secretary Mattis will be there, and it cannot be an excuse for the U.S. and India just to withdraw and let whatever happens in Pakistan happen.
I'm going to request you all to stay with us, and I want to focus on another aspect of this development in Pakistan. The protests in Islamabad were carried out by little-known Tehreek-e-Labbaik, a small political party known for its hardline Islamist stand. The protest brought Pakistan's capital to a standstill. What explains the rise of such hardline groups in Pakistan? WION's Aditya Dhunna explores.
It was a tense weekend in Islamabad. A highway just outside the capital looked like a war zone. Tensions continue to simmer. The Pakistan government has been forced to relent to the protesters. The country's law minister Zahid Hamid has resigned. Over the last 3 weeks, protesters from the little-known Tehreek-e-Labbaik, a hardline Islamist political party, brought the country on its heels. Recent trends explain Tehreek-e-Labbaik's rise. Ahead of the 2018 general elections, the Tehreek-e-Labbaik has been trying to make inroads in Pakistan's politics. In the recent Lahore by-election, the party won more than 7,000 votes. Another new party making its presence felt in the Lahore election was the Milli Muslim League, an offshoot of 2611 mastermind Hafiz Saeed's Jamaat-ud-Dawa. This is a worrying trend in Pakistan. After the fall of Nawaz Sharif and ahead of the coming elections, hardline parties linked to terror groups are trying to attract the PMLN voter base. Many feel the protests by Tehreek-e-Labbaik are an attempt to attract public support. These efforts are believed to be well supported by the country's military establishment. Take this tweet by Pakistan's military spokesperson on Saturday, for instance. Many experts believe Major General Asif Ghafoor's comments gave legitimacy to hardliners. This is something that the country's military establishment has been pushing for. The army, on several occasions, has pitched to integrate terrorist-linked groups into the mainstream. While the military continues to deny its tacit support to such groups, it has often used extremists to raise questions over the legitimacy of the civilian government. Under pressure to act against terror groups, it looks like Islamabad is yet again helpless before the military's mood. Bureau Report, WION.
So the picture is still not very clear. Let's tell you what that agreement, that note of agreement between the government and the protesters said. It had a special note of thanks for the Army Chief General Bajwa for quote-unquote saving the country from a big catastrophe. What was the role of the army? Let's once again play out for you that video that we've accessed of what the army did to quell the protests.
सर ये हम कर नहीं आपकी तरफ कोई चले ही हमारी तरफ से क्या हम आपके साथ नहीं है क्या हम आपके साथ नहीं है आप नहीं बोल
इसमें कितने पैसे हैं 1000
हाँ ये देखिए हमारे बच्चों की बात सुनो
ऊपर जो बैठे हुए हैं उन्होंने खुद को आवाम को आपस में लड़ा के
ये सुन कितने अकल की बात है हमारे ये सारे इंशाल्लाह सारे छुड़वाएंगे वो उधर हमको दीजिएगा ये वो हैं जो कि अभी हमें एक थाने से हमने निकाले हैं कुछ थोड़े और भी दूसरे
क्या हम आपके साथ नहीं हैं? Are we not with you is what this man in uniform says as he gives money to protesters, Taha Siddiqui. Is it very clear now that the army is trying to prepare ground for a soft entry of some of these parties on the larger political stage in Pakistan?
Definitely, Palki. Not just just this group particularly, but as the report also mentioned, there has been this effort by the Pakistan military, and one of the generals recently he's a recently retired general, and he comes on Pakistani media a lot, and he spoke about this particular aspect also, about how there is a plan that was hashed by the last army chief, General Rahil Sharif, in starting this process of mainstreaming religious extremist groups. Now, the reason that the military had given to the civilian government over this and was pushing for it was to say that this is for de-radicalization. But more now that we see this is happening, actually, it seems like it's not for that de-radicalization purpose, but rather, this is happening in Punjab, where the vote bank is of PMLN, Nawaz Sharif party, and given the recent sort of tensions between the ruling party and the Pakistan military over the disqualification of Nawaz Sharif, after which Nawaz Sharif and his party members have said that it was an engineered sort of ouster, it seems like the military is also using these religious extremist groups as proxies, as political proxies, to dent the vote bank of PMLN in the coming elections.
Ahmad Shaheen, is it very clear, the same question to you, that the army is trying to prop up these people, outfits like these, first the release of Hafiz Saeed, now the resignation of a federal minister because of the kind of protest mounted by a hitherto unknown group? It's a very, very small political entity that has now taken center stage in Pakistan politics.
Yes, and also for this government, he's not the only federal minister who has resigned. Ministers and people of authority elected by the people of Pakistan have had to go once they have had any kind of, they don't fit in the plan of the military establishment, or as it sees. But I mean, it's not just the mainstreaming of the religious elements. Election season is coming up, and during the election season, as it has happened with the PMLQ, with the IJI, all these parties created by the military establishment, the Muttahida Majlis-e-Amal, which is a collection of many political parties, religious political parties, is also gaining momentum. It's being established, it's given power. There are other pro-military, allegedly pro-military allies, that the Karachi-based MQM Pakistan and the PSP, Pak Sarzameen Party. The leader of the Pak Sarzameen Party has recently confessed in media that it was indeed the military establishment that was making arrangements for these politicians to merge and make a pro-establishment political party as well. So, it's always happened. The courts have already had verdicts on it. People have confessed, generals have confessed that these political parties have been indeed made by the military, but they were never made so openly. Now it's on the media. Maybe it's because of technology is more open, or maybe it's because it can be more blatant now. The military can afford to be more blatant about the fact that, yes, we are interfering in politics, and they never deny. I mean, if one of the pro-military politicians says, yes, the military is helping meet other politicians and make alliances with them, they never come out and, overwhelmingly call them a liar or anything. They're just like, whatever, we're okay with it. So I think the military is kind of becoming more confident in the fact that because also there's been a brainwashing done by the state television over the years about the role of democracy and the role of military. It's all, not been very clear. So I think the military kind of feels that the people of Pakistan would no more be alarmed as much if people are talking about them being involved in the politicizing of affairs of the country.
I think the people of Pakistan are faced with very, very bad choices at this point, and the military doesn't need to have an overt coup. It can rule by proxy. It can prop up its own puppets, if you like, and that's what it's trying to do ahead of the upcoming election. We're calling it mainstreaming extremism here on WION. I'm going to thank you all. That's all I have time for right now. Raymond Vikri, Razaul Hassan Laskar, Ahmed Shaheen and Taha Siddiqui. Ahead on the show, Pakistan will host a special guest this weekend who comes bearing stern warnings. Re-arrest Hafiz Saeed or face the consequences.